What's going on YouTube? Today in this tutorial, let's develop a password manager application using Angular and Firestore. Let's get started. Actually guys, I developed this application to solve my own problem. As a freelance developer, I found myself managing a large number of online accounts for my clients. Domain accounts, hosting accounts, payment wallets, email accounts, and more. However, I encountered a major problem when trying to keep track of all these passwords. I used to save all my account information and password on an Excel sheet, but one day my hard disk crashed and I lost everything, all 100 plus accounts, including my own Payoneer, PayPal, and Stripe accounts. It was a tough process to recover all the information and I didn't want to go through that again. So I tried using online tools and Chrome extensions to save all my passwords, but there were limits to how many passwords I could store. And I was not completely comfortable with trusting these online password managers. That's when I realized as a developer, why not create my own password manager? So I decided to develop a password manager. Not only that, but I also decided to create a video tutorial so my students could follow along and create their own password manager. It would be a valuable project to add to your portfolios. So guys, for this I am going to use the Angular and the Google Firebase Firestore database. So any of you guys new to Angular, I have created a full complete Angular full course. You guys can check it out. I'll leave the links in the description. Now let's quickly demonstrate the password manager app that we are going to build in this tutorial. In order to access our password manager, first we have to log in. So guys, for this we're going to use the Firebase Auth module. So this will be the main page of our password manager application. Here we can find all the website list. For this application, I designed this funky styled awesome looking theme using the Tailwind CSS. I did not even write any custom CSS codes. Alright, so from here we can create a new site. All the sites will be loaded down here. We can edit the site using this edit button. So when we click this edit button, this will load the details inside this form. Previously this form was a new site form. Now it's converted as an edit site form. So once we are done the editing, we can update the data using this edit button, right? So as you can see here, this edit loaded here in real time. How is that? As I said earlier, for this we're going to use the Firestore as our database, which is a real-time database. That's why this data loaded in real time. We can delete the site from this delete button. With this add new password, we can save the user login details for this site. If I click this will open this page. In here we can see the site details. From this form we can save new password details, email, username and password. Down here we can find all the saved password details under this website. So guys, for security purpose, we encrypt and save the password inside the Firestore database. So in order to decrypt this password, we can use this decrypt password button. Next, with the edit and delete buttons, as usual, we can edit this password or we can delete this password from the database. So guys, as I said earlier, for this we use the Angular framework for the front end, and for the database we'll use the Firestore database from Firebase, right? For the authentication we will use the Firebase authentication module. That's it for the demo. So you guys may have a clear picture of what we are going to build in this video. So let's begin. So first let's create a new Angular project. Inside the terminal, I'll run this command to create a new Angular project. ng new, the project name is something password manager. Yes, we will use the Angular router for this. From here select CSS. That's it. Once the installation is done, open this inside the VS Code. As I said in the intro, we're gonna use Tailwind CSS as our CSS framework. So guys, if any of you are new to Tailwind CSS, I have created a full course about Tailwind CSS, so you guys can watch that. I leave the link in the description. In order to use Tailwind CSS, we have to install that in our Angular project. So we can find the details in the official Tailwind CSS documentation. So first run this command to install Tailwind CSS on our Angular project. Once it's done, next run this command to create a Tailwind CSS configuration file. So as you can see here, this previous init command create this Tailwind config file. Open this and copy and paste this inside here. Next, add these Tailwind components inside our root CSS file, which is this styles.css. So guys, that's it for the Tailwind CSS installation and configurations. So guys, next let's create environment files. In the latest Angular version, the Angular team has removed the environment files from the Angular boilerplate. But in order to use the Angular Fire Angular package, we need this. So let's create this manually. So guys, recently I released a full guide about this, how to use Angular Fire latest version with the Angular's latest version. So in case any of you guys missed this, you can check it out. So I'll leave the link in the description. Alright, inside the src folder, create an environment folder and create two files, environment.ts and environment.prod.ts. Inside these files, we have to create the environment's initial object. So create that as well. Awesome. Before we install the Firebase Angular Fire module in our Angular project, first let's create a Firebase project. So go to the firebase.google.com and go to the console. In here, let's create a brand new project by clicking this. The project name is something password manager. So after this, agree to these terms and click continue. Remove this Google Analytics and create the project. Once it has been completed, go to the Firestore tab and configure the Firestore database as well. So from here, select the test mode and create the database. That's it. Alright, so guys, now we have fulfilled all the pre-requirements to install Angular Fire. So now let's install this. Inside the VS Code, open the integrated terminal and run this command: ng add angular/fire. From here, select the Firebase module that we're gonna use with our application. So for our password manager, we will use the authentication and the Firestore database. So select it and hit enter to execute this command. So now from here, select the Firebase account. After this, from here, create a new application, give it a name and hit enter. So guys, this will install and configure all the necessary things for us. We don't need to do anything. So I'm going through these steps a little fast because I already created a full guide for this. If any of you guys don't understand this configuration, I strongly recommend you guys to watch this tutorial. So links are in the description. Alright, so we have successfully completed all the plugins installation and configurations. Now let's generate the all required components and service files. For this application, we need several components: a Navbar component for the Navbar, SiteList component for the list of sites, and we need a password list component for password management. At last, we need a separate component for the login page. That's all. So now let's generate them quickly. So how do we generate Angular components? Can you guys remember? Yes, of course. We can generate them using the Angular CLI. So inside the integrated terminal, run this command ng gc. This G stands for generate and this C stands for component because we are generating components. Okay. So after this, pass the component name. This is for the navbar, so the component name is navbar. Perfect. We created the component. You can find this component inside this app folder. Awesome. Next, the second component, site list. So ng gc site dash list. Next, password list. So ng gc password dash list. Next, this is for the login page. So the component name is login. Perfect. We successfully created all required components. Next, we need a service file to write the database queries. So let's generate that. For this application, I will only use one service file. So inside the integrated terminal, nggs. This time we're going to generate a service file. So this S stands for service. Okay, so the service file name is something password dash manager. Hit enter to execute this command. That's it. So now we have all the required files. Next, let's begin the design. Alright, let's begin the design with the navbar component. The navbar will be a simple design. So on the left side, I will show the application name and the right side will show a logout button. So let's design this. For this, we will use only the Tailwind CSS. No need to write any custom CSS codes. Alright, so open the navbar component HTML file and add these markups. First, create a nav HTML file tag. Inside this, add these Tailwind CSS classes. BG white, border 2, border gray 900, px2, py3, rounded, shadow md. Now inside this, create a div and add these classes: container, flex, flex wrap, items center, justify between, mx-auto. So now inside this, create a span tag and add these classes: self center, text excel, font semi-bold. So inside the span tag, add the brand name Okta Academy, password M. After this, let's add the logout button. So create a button tag and add these classes: text white, BG gray 900, rounded LG, text SM, px5 and py3. The button text will be logout. That's it for the navbar markups. Now let's see this inside the browser. So for this, we have to add this navbar component selector inside the app component. So let's do this. Open the app component HTML file and remove these default boilerplate codes. Now add the navbar component selector app-navbar. That's it. Save this all and let's run this application. Inside the integrated terminal, run this command ng serve. So this will compile and run our Angular app inside of a local server. Once this compilation is done, go to this URL localhost 4200. This is what the navbar looks like with these Tailwind CSS classes. To achieve this simple design, we just only used Tailwind CSS classes, right? So I'm not going to explain all of these Tailwind CSS classes. You guys can simply understand this with these class names. So I have already created a course for this, so you guys can check that out. Alright, so let's move on to the second component, SiteList Component. Alright, now let's design the SiteList component. So open the SiteList component HTML page and add these markups. Create a div and add these tailwind CSS classes. Container, mxauto, my16. Inside this container div, create a h1 tag. The classes are text 5xl, empty-0, mb-5. The text is something like Okta Academy Password Manager. After this, create a p tag and add some dummy text as the paragraph. For this p tag, add this margin bottom 5 tailwind utility class. After this, let's add a button for the add new form. So create a button and add these classes mb-5, mx-0.5, px-5, py3, text sm, bg gray 900, text white, shadow, rounded md. The button text is add new site. That's it for the button. Let's move on to the next. Down here, we'll create a form to save a new site. So now add these markups. So create a div with these classes px20, py10, mb10, my5, border 4, border gray 900. So inside this, first let's add a title for this form. So create an h2 tag and add these classes text 3xl, text center. The h1 text will be add new site. Below this, add a p tag and add these classes text center, and the paragraph text will be you can add a new site from the below form. Now after this, let's create the form. So create form tag. For this, we don't have to write any tailwind CSS classes. Inside this form, we need 3 inputs, one for the site name, another one for the site URL, and the last input for the site image URL. So let's create them. So first create a div with these classes flex and flex call. Inside this, create a label and add these classes to this label tag text LG, font medium, mb-2. The label text is site name. So after this, create an input tag and the input type is text. Name attribute, and this input name is something site name. Next, add these tailwind CSS classes to this input tag. So border 2, border gray 900, p2, rounded LG, w-full. That's it for this first input. So guys, as I said earlier, we need 2 more inputs. This is also the same as this, so copy and paste this input 2 times. The second input is for the site URL. So the label text is site URL. The input name is site URL, and keep other values are as it is. The third input for the site is image URL, so change the label and the input name attribute to site img URL. Perfect. Now after this, let's create the submit button. So after this, create a button tag and add these classes empty-10, mx-0.5, px5, py3, text sm, bg gray 900, text white, shadow, rounded md. The button text will be add new site. Let's add another button for cancel. So create a button tag and add these classes empty-10, mx-0.5, px-5, py-3, text sm, border 2, border gray 900, text gray 900, shadow rounded MD. The button text will be cancel. Alright, that's it for the form markups. Before we move on to the next, let's see this inside the browser, how this looks like. So save this all and go to the browser. In here we can only see this Navbar component, but we cannot see the SiteList component. Can you guys, why is that? Yes, of course, in order to show a component inside the browser, we have to add the component selector inside the app component, like this Navbar component selector. So the site list component selector is this app-site-list. So add this after this Navbar component selector. Save this again and go to the browser. So guys, as you can see here, this time we can see our site list component here with this add new site form. Looks cool, right? Alright, let's move on. So guys, next let's design the site list card after this form. Nothing much, very simple design using the Tailwind CSS. So inside this same site list component, after this add this markup. First of all, create a grid div. So div and Tailwind class is grid. Next, inside of a row, we will show 4 site list cards. So add this class grid-calls-4. After this, set the gap to around 5. Inside this, the site list card div, create a div and add these classes shadow LG, border 2, border gray 900. So inside this div, create an image tag for the site image. For the src, for now just add an image URL. Search the GoDaddy from Google search and copy this GoDaddy image URL and paste it inside this src. Alright, next after this img tag, add this create a h3 tag and the classes are p3, text excel, font bold. This h3 is for the site name. So for now just simply type a name, later we will make this dynamic. So the site name is godaddy.com. Next after this, let's add the site URL, create a div and add these classes. So w60 m-3 px-3 bg blue 200 text blue 800 rounded LG text SM. Add the site URL as this text for this div godaddy.com. Perfect. Next we have to add action button for this site list card. So for this we have to create 3 buttons. One is for the add new password for the site list. The second button is for edit the site, and the last button for delete this site from the Firestore database. So let's create these buttons. First, the add new password button, create a button tag and add these classes my3, ml3, mx 0.5, px 5, py3, text sm, bg gray 900, text white shadow, rounded md. The button text is add new password. Next another button and add these classes my3, mx 0.5, px 5, py3, text sm, border 2, border gray 900, text gray 900, shadow, rounded md. The button text is edit. For the read button also copy and paste the second button. So these button styles are same. So no need to change anything. This last button text is delete. That's it for the site list card markup. Now again save this all and back to the browser. As you can see here, this time we can see this awesome looking site list card. Looks awesome, right? Alright guys, this site list is still static. So we just designed this, and now before we move on to the next password component list, we'll make this site list component functional. So guys, let's do the query for this site list. So first thing first, in order to save the data inside the Firestore database, we have to capture the user input data. As you know, this form is still a static form. In order to capture the data, we'll convert this to an Angular template driven form. In order to make this form template driven, the first thing first, we have to import the forms module. So let's do this. Inside the app module TS file, import the forms module. Now again go to the site list component and let's make this form as a template driven. So inside this form tag, create a template variable hashtag f and assign it to ng form. Next, add the ng model directive to all of these inputs. Ng model. Next, let's add the submit function. So inside this form and add this ng submit event binding. Inside brackets ng submit, assign, create a method something called onSubmit. As the parameter, pass this form's value. So we capture this form's value using this template variable. So inside this f.value. So guys, as you can see here, we are getting this compile error. We still do not have this method. So let's create this method inside the component TS file. So open the SiteList component TS file. Inside this class scope, let's create the onSubmit method. The method name is onSubmit, parentheses. This required a parameter variable. So parameter variable name is something values, and set this type to object. Next, the method scope. For now, let's log this values parameter variable and see whether this submission is working or not. So save this all and go to the browser, fill this form, and hit this button. As you can see inside the browser console, we got this object with these forms values. Awesome, right? So guys, we can also write the Firestore queries inside the same component TS file, but as a good practice in Angular, we write all the third-party request API queries inside of an Angular service file. So guys, already we generated this previously when we generate the components, right? So open the service file. Inside this, let's write the save or the create query for this Firestore. So inside this, first let's import Firestore methods from Angular Fire. So first thing first, we need the Firestore module. So import it. Inside this import section, import, inside curly brackets, the module name is Firestore with capital F. So this is coming from @angular/fire/Firestore. So in order to use this, we have to inject this to the constructor. So inside this constructor parentheses, private Firestore and colon Firestore. This is called dependency injection. Alright, so guys, to write the create query, we need two more methods from Angular Fire. So let's import them as well. So these methods also coming from the same path. So inside the same import, add these collection. These all letters are simple. Next, the add-doc method. So this D is capital. That's it. So now let's create a method, something called addSite and parentheses. After this, add the method scope. So we get the form data from the SiteList component to this service method as a parameter. So create a parameter variable to capture that. The variable name is data and set this type to object. Now inside this, let's write the create query. So first we have to create the database instance. So create a variable something const db instance assign collection, so which is this imported method from Angular. This collection method requires two parameters. As the first parameter, we have to pass the Firestore module. So we already injected that to this constructor. So let's pass it here, this dot Firestore. So as the second parameter, we have to pass the Firestore collection name. In our case, we are dealing with the sites. So set the collection name as sites. Pass this as a string value inside of quotes. Awesome. Alright guys, next in order to save the data inside the Firestore, we have another method called addDoc. We already imported that. So now let's use that to write the create query. So after this, addDoc and parentheses. This requires two parameters. As the first parameter, pass the db instance, this variable. So as the second parameter, pass the data object that we want to save inside the Firestore database. So we are getting the data to this method as a parameter. So pass this parameter variable here, data. That's it for the create query. Now let's call this service method from our component onSubmit method. So let's do this. Inside this onSubmit method, call this addSite method. In order to access an Angular service file, we have to inject that into this constructor. So inside this component file, we don't have the constructor method. So create it, constructor and parentheses. Inside this, private password manager, and the service file is password manager, and select this auto import. This will import this service to this component. Alright, now let's call the addSite method from this onSubmit method. So inside this dot the service file injection is password manager and dot. Now the method name is addSite. This requires the data parameter, so pass that. So we are getting the forms value to this method with this values parameter variable, so pass that here. In order to handle the callback, we have to return this query callback from this service file. So we'll get the callback inside this component TS file. So now let's handle the callback. This will return a promise. So after this dot then and the callback. Inside this, handle the success message. So after this, the error state will handle the error state with the catch method. So dot catch and the callback. So the parameter variable is something error and log this error inside this callback. So guys, that's it. We successfully completed our first query. Alright guys, any of you guys are confused or don't get these steps about this Firestore query, you guys can check my full guide on how to use Angular 5.7 with Angular latest version. The link's in the description. Alright, let's save this and go to the browser and fill out this form. Add the site name. Let's add this same GoDaddy details. So the site name is godaddy.com. The site URL is https://godaddy.com. Next, the image URL. So get it from the Google. Right click, copy the image URL and paste it here. Now click this save button. Guys, as you can see here inside this browser console, we got the success message, which means the data saved inside the Firestore successfully. So let's confirm it. Go to the Firestore console and refresh it. As you can see here, we got this collection size, and inside this we can see this document ID. Inside that we got our first Firestore document. Cool, right? Alright guys, we successfully completed this save query. Now let's work on the load query. So for this, first thing first, let's write the query. So we will write all the queries inside the service file, right? So go to this and create a new method, something called load sites. After this parentheses. So for this we don't need to get any parameter values, so keep it empty. After this create the method scope. Before we write the query, import another method for this load query from Angular Fire module. So this also comes from the same path, so put this inside of the same import. The method name is collection data. So this D is capital. So guys, carefully follow these capital simple letters. Now back to the load sites method and write the query. So for this also we need the database instance. So take it from the previous method and paste it here. Next the load query. So collection data and parentheses. For this pass the DB instance. So as the second parameter pass the ID object because we need the document's ID. So after this object scope ID field colon ID. So pass this as a string value. So the second parameter is optional. If we pass this, we will get the dataset with the document ID. Otherwise, we will not get the ID. Right? So that's it for the query. Next, let's return this. Then only we can access this data from the component TS file. So now go to the SiteList Component TS file and create a method, load sites and the parentheses. No need to pass any parameter variables. So after this, the method scope. Now inside this, let's call the load site service method. So how do we call that? In order to access Angular service, we have to use the dependency injection method. So we did that already. So now inside this method, this dot password service, which is this injected service variable. After this dot, this time call this load sites method. So this will return an observable. So subscribe to this observable to get the data. So after this dot subscribe and the callback, create a parameter variable to capture the data. So the parameter variable name is something val and arrow function inside this log this val variable. So guys, that's it for the load query. Now we have the method. In order to execute this method, we have to call this method. So let's call this from the constructor. So inside this dot load sites and the parentheses. So now save this all and go to the browser. Inside the browser console, we can see this object array. So inside that, as you can see, we got our site data from Firestore, which means the load site query is working as we expected. So guys, as you can see here, data is loaded inside the console. But in order to show this to the user, we have to load this inside of our view. For this, we already designed the SiteList card. This card details are still static. We hand coded them. Now let's replace this data with the dynamic data from Firestore. So first thing first, we do not need the subscribe method, so remove it. Next, assign this to something global variable. So inside the global scope, the variable name is all sites and this variable type will be observable. So select this autocomplete. This will import the observable to this component TS file automatically. After this, set this observable type to an array and set this array type to any. Still, we are getting this compile error. To prevent this, add this exclamation point. Now go to the load sites method and assign this to the all sites global variable. So this dot all site assign to this query. So guys, now we have the data stored inside of the global variable. Now let's show this inside the view. So go to the SiteList component HTML file. Go to the SiteList card div and inside this add the ng4 directive to loop the observable. So ng4 and assign inside codes let site of all sites. This all site is the global variable which is carrying the data from the Firestore. This is observable. In order to loop this, we have to use the async pipe here. So the pipe symbol and pipe name is async. Awesome. Guys, next let's replace the static data with the real data. First thing first, let's make this image src dynamic. So for this we can use the data binding method. So wrap this src with a square bracket. Remove this encoded URL. Inside this, now add the site, which is this ng4 loop variable, and the document key name. As you know, we save our image URL with this key name. So site.siteimg URL. So that's it. Next, let's move on to the title. For this, we can use a string interpolation. So remove this and create a string interpolation space. Open and close two curly brackets. Inside this, add this site.siteName. This site is this ng4 loop variable, and the site name is the Firestore key name. Alright, so next remove the site link and add this. Open and close two curly brackets. Inside this, site.site URL. That's it. Save this all and go to the browser. As you can see here, this time we got this data loaded here. You can't find the difference, right? So previously also we showed the same card with the static data. Let's add a new data and see whether it's loading here or not. So the site name is something digitalocean.com. The site URL is https://digitalocean.com, and the site image, as usual, get this image URL from the Google search. Copy this URL and paste it here. Once it's done, hit this save button. Look at this, guys. As you can see here, our newly saved data is loaded inside this site list card, which means everything working as we expected. So guys, if you noticed, as soon as I hit the save button, the newly saved data loaded here in real time. So how this is happening? Because the Firestore database is real-time database. So every time we change the Firestore database any data, the changes are immediately loaded inside our application. Right? So guys, we successfully completed the load site Firestore query and its related functions. Now let's move on to the next edit data. So guys, now let's see how to edit the data. For this we have to do a few steps. So first we have to load the editing data inside this forms input. Then only we can edit those data, right? So after that we have to update the Firestore database with the edited data. So first thing first, let's see how to load the data that we want to edit inside this form. For this we can pass this data from HTML view to the components TS file via binding to a method parameter when clicking this edit button. So let's do this first. Inside this edit button, so click event binding, inside brackets, click. Now assign this to a method called something edit site. After this, add the parentheses. Inside this parentheses, pass all the data that we want to edit. So first, site name. We can get the site name with the ng4 site variable. So site dot site name. The second parameter is site dot site URL. As the third parameter, pass the site dot site img URL. Guys, in order to update the data inside the Firestore, we have to pass the document ID to the Firestore database. So we'll pass that also as a parameter. So as the last parameter, pass the ID. So site.id. So guys, still we don't have this method. That's why we are getting this error. So let's create this method inside the component TS file. So inside this SiteList Component TS file, create the method. The method name is edit site. After this parentheses and the method scope. This parameter has 4 parameter variables. So we are passing that from here. So create parameter variables to capture these values. So the first one is for the site name. So the variable name is site name, and the data type is string. Next, for the site URL, so the variable name is site URL and this variable type is string. Next, for the site image URL, so the variable name is site img URL and this type also string. At last, we are passing the document ID, so the parameter variable name is id and this type also string. Perfect. Guys, now we have the data here. Next, what I want to do is I want to load this data inside this form. Guys, how do we do that? Can you guys guess? For this, we can use the two-way data binding approach, right? So it's very easy. So let's begin. So create a global variable for this two-way data binding. So the first global variable is site name and the type is string. Next, site URL, this type also string. The site image URL, so the variable name is site img URL and also this type is string. And at last, we need another variable for the ID. So the variable name is site ID and this type is also string. Now, assign these parameter variables to these global variables. So inside this method, let's do this. So the first variable is site name. So this dot site name assigned to this parameter variable site name. So guys, this variable is the global variable and this is the parameter variable. So don't get confused. Okay. Alright. So next, site URL. So the global variable is this dot site URL. Assign the parameter variable site URL. Next, the global variable is site img URL. Assign parameter variable site img URL. After this, global variable is this dot site id and assign this to this parameter id variable. Alright guys, so now we have the data, but in order to edit this data, we have to load this data inside this form, right? So guys, how do we do that? Very simple. For this, we can use the two-way data binding approach as I said earlier. So let's see this in action. So guys, in order to do the two-way data binding, we have to wrap this ng model inside of brackets and square brackets, right? So do that. Now assign this to the site name global variable because this input is for the site name. Okay. So actually guys, I hope you guys already know this two-way data binding approach. I'll quickly explain it. With this, we can assign a variable to an input tag. So this will load this variable data inside the input field. And also if we change that loaded data, it will automatically assign that edited value to this variable. So this is just a simple explanation. If you guys do not know anything about it, you guys can check my Angular full course where you will learn about this from scratch. Okay, we'll move on to the next. Make the second input ng model as a two-way data binding. Put this inside of brackets and square brackets and also assign this to the site URL global variable. Next, the site image URL. Put this inside this and assign it to site img URL global variable. So that's it for loading the editing data inside this form. So let's see if this is working or not. So save this all and go to the browser. Click on this edit button and look at this guys. These site details are loaded inside this form. Cool, right? So guys, I'll explain it to you how I did this one more time. So in order to edit the data, we have to load the data into this form, right? Then only we can add the changes to that data. Okay. So in order to do this, we have to pass the data that we want to edit to the component TS file. So for this, I use this method approach to passing the data to the TypeScript file as a parameter variables. So this is what I did here. I passed the site data to this edit site method as parameters. So inside this method, I captured all the data with these parameter variables. So after that, in order to access this data out of this method, I assigned all these parameter variable to these global variables. So then only we can access this data outside of this method scope. So after that, I used the two-way data binding approach to load this site data inside this form. So nothing much, very simple. Okay. Alright guys, now we have the data that we want to edit. Next, let's see how to write the update query. Before that, let's do another small thing. As you can see here, when I press this edit button, this form loaded the editing data. But this form's title and this button is showing this add new site. So now what I want to do is I want to make this static text to dynamic, and I want to make this add new text to edit site when we dealing with the editing process. So how do we do that? Very simple. So let's see this in action. So first let's create a global variable, something called form state. So this type is string, and the set initial value to add new. So set this as a string inside of quotes. So now I will make this forms title dynamic by adding this form state variable here. So we can add this using the string interpolation. So remove the static add new text and add this. So open and close curly brackets. Inside this, pass the variable form state. Do the same for this button. Remove this add new and add the string interpolation, and the variable name is form state. So save this all and back to the browser. Now we can see this add new this time. So this is not a static text, so we made it dynamic with the string interpolation. So now if I click this edit button, this is still in the default add new stage. So what I want to do is I want to make this add new to edit when clicking this button. So go to this edit site method and assign edit to this form state variable. So this dot form state assign, the value is edit. So pass this as a string. Now save this and back to the browser. Click on this edit button. As you can see here, this time this add new changed to edit. So now this is looking perfect. Alright guys, now let's work on the update query. So first let's write the query. So inside the service file, after this create method, the method name is update site and the parentheses. After this add the method scope. So guys, this required the document ID and the edited data to execute the Firestore update query. So we will get those data as a parameter for this method. So create a parameter variable to capture these. The first parameter for the document ID, so the parameter variable name is ID. The type is string. Next for the data, so the variable name is data and the type is object. Now inside this, let's write the query. Previously we used the DB instance to identify the collection, but for this update we have to capture the document instance. For this we have a separate method in AngularFire. So let's import that. So this also coming from the same module. So inside the same import, the first method is doc, all simple letters. The next method is update doc. So we use this doc method to define the document instance like the collection method, and we can use this update doc to write the update query. So now inside this method, first let's write the doc instance. So create a variable const doc instance, assign doc, which is this imported AngularFire method, and after this parentheses. So first we have to pass the Firestore module, same like the previous. So this dot Firestore. After this we have to pass the collection name. We are dealing with the site, so the collection name is sites. So after this we have to pass another parameter for this, which is the document ID. So pass it here, ID, which is this ID parameter variable. So guys, with this we are filtering the target Firestore document that we want to update. Okay. Alright, so now let's write the query. For this we imported the update doc Angular 5 method. So update doc and parentheses. This required two parameters, this doc instance and the edited data object. So pass this doc instance and this data parameter variable. So guys, in order to handle the success state, return this. So that's it. So guys, that's it for the update query. Now let's call this update query method from the SiteList component TS file. As you guys know, for this editing also we are using this same save form. So this form will call this onSubmit method when we submit this form. But with this onSubmit method, we are calling this save query. So in order to perform the edit query also with this onSubmit, we have to differentiate the form status whether it is a save operation or update operation. So this we can use the form status global variable. If this variable value is add new, which means the operation is save. If value is edit, the form submission operation is update, right? So let's see this in action. So inside this onSubmit method, create a if condition. The condition is this dot form status equals add new. If this is add new, we have to call the add site method. So remove this from here and put it inside this if block. Now next else if condition block, and the condition is this dot form state equals, this time we check if this is edit or not. So the value is edit. So guys, if this is edit, we have to call the update site service method. So inside this dot password service dot update site. This method required two parameters, the ID and the edited data. If you guys can remember, we stored the ID of the editing data with this site ID global variable. So now we can pass that here. This dot site ID. Next the data. So we are getting the edited data with this parameter variable. So pass that as the second parameter for this method. So after this, handle the success or error state. This returns a promise. So after this dot then call back inside this and the log. The log message is data updated. Next for the error state dot catch and the callback parameter variable is error and inside this log this error. That's it guys, we successfully completed all the queries of update site. So let's see whether this is working or not. So save this all and go to the browser. Click on this edit and edit these values, site name and the site URL. Next submit this form by clicking this edit button. As you can see here, inside this browser console, we got this data updated success message, which means the data update query is working without any problem. And also guys, we can see this updated site name and the site URL here. So guys, which means everything working as we expected. Alright, so this is the end of this update query. Let's move on to the delete query. So guys, this delete query process is easy to compare to the previous update query process. So let's do this. First thing first, let's write the delete query. So go to the service file and create a method called delete site, parentheses and the method scope. In order to delete a document from file store, we need the target documents ID. So we will get that ID to this method as a parameter. So create a parameter variable to capture that. So the parameter variable is ID and this type is string. Perfect. Now next inside this, let's write the query. So for this also, like this update, we need the document instance. We already did this, so copy and paste it here. So after this, delete query. So guys, like others, we have a separate method for this delete query. First let's import it. This also comes with the same path. So inside this, the method is delete doc. This D is capital. Now back to the delete site method. So now after this, delete doc and parentheses, which require the document instance. So pass it here. So guys, that's it for the query. In order to access this from the component, just return this. Awesome. Now back to the component HTML file. I want to trigger the delete query when clicking this delete button. So let's do that. Create a click event and assign it to a method called delete site and the parentheses. In order to delete a document, we need the ID of that document. So pass it as a parameter for this method, the site.id. Still we don't have this method, so let's create that. Inside this component is file, the method name is delete site and the parentheses. So inside this parentheses, parameter variable id and the type is string. After this, define the method scope. Now from here, let's call the service delete method. So this dot password service, which is this injected service, and the parentheses, this required the id, so pass it as a parameter for this method. So after this, handle the callbacks. After this dot, then callback, and inside this log the success message. After this, define the error state with the catch method. So guys, that's it for the delete query. Now save this all and go to the browser. Click on this delete. As you can see here, the site card is removed from the list. And also we can see this data deleted success message inside this browser console. So guys, which means delete query is working as we expected. Alright, we successfully completed all the queries for the site list. Now guys, if you can remember, we logged all the success messages inside the browser console. So it's not a good practice. The end user will not use this browser console. So in a real world production application, we will show this success state with an alert message. So let's do this for our application as well. So let's first design a simple alert message. So inside the HTML file, after this site heading and before this new site form, let's create the alert. So create a div with these classes p5, my3, bg till 100, text till 900. Now inside this div, for now let's set a dummy success message. So something data saved. Now save this and go to the browser. Now as you can see here, we got this success alert message. Now what I want to do is, I want to show this message conditionally. If any of the query state is success, I want to show this alert message. So let's do this as well. So nothing much, it's very simple. Just simply create a global variable, something is success, and this type is boolean, and set this default value to false. Next, what I want to do is, I want to set this is success value to true in these success callbacks. So like this console log. So guys, first let's do this to the save operation. So remove this log, we don't need that anymore. Inside this, set this is success value to true. So this dot is success, assign true. Now do this for the update query. So copy and paste this, and also do the same for the delete operation as well. That's it. So now let's show the alert message conditionally using this boolean value inside the HTML view. So how do we do that? In Angular, very simple. For this we can use the ngIf condition. So inside this alert div, ngIf, and pass the is success boolean value. So if this boolean value is false, this will not show this alert inside the view. If this is true, this will appear inside the browser. Now let's save this all and go to the browser. This time we cannot see the alert message. Why is that? At the initial stage, we set this is success boolean value to false. So that's why this is not appearing inside the browser. Okay, now let's save a new site and see whether this is working or not. The site name is something paypal.com and the site URL https://paypal.com image URL. As usual, copy this from the Google image search. Once you fill the form, save this. Now as you can see here, this time we got this alert message saying data save. Perfect, right? Now next let's test this with the editing process. So edit this, change this data to something and click this edit. As you can see here, this time also we got this success alert, but this says data saved message even in the edit operation. It's not good, right? So let's fix this. Again, create another global variable for this, something success message, and set this type to string. Next, let's create a method show alert, and this required the message parameter. So guys, we're gonna use this method to show the alert message. So inside this, let's set this is success to true and set this success message value to this message parameter variable, because we will get the alert message to this method as the parameter. So that's it for this method. Now let's call this method from the all these success state. So remove this from the save query and call the show alert message. So pass the alert message as the parameter for this show alert method. This is for the save operation, so the message should be data save successfully. Next, do the same for the edit. Remove this and this dot show alert parentheses, pass the message data edited successfully. Next, move on to the delete. So remove this previous boolean value, call the show alert method and pass the message data deleted successfully. Next, now let's make this static message to dynamic inside the HTML view. For this, we can show this success message variable inside this view. So remove this hand coded success message. Now add a string interpolation and the variable name is success message. That's it. Save this all and go to the browser. Again, create a new site. We got this data save success message. Next, edit this site. As you can see here, this time we got this data edited success message. Next, delete this. As you can see here, this time we got this data delete alert. So now this looks perfect. Alright, we successfully completed all the queries and logic of the all sites component. Now let's move on to the password list component. So as usual, first let's design the view. After that, we'll work on the queries. So open the password list component HTML file. If you can remember, we generated this component at the beginning of this lecture. Okay, so inside this, let's add the markups. First, create a div and add these Tailwind CSS classes, container, mx auto, my16. Now inside this div, create another div and add these Tailwind CSS classes, grid calls to, gap 5. That's it. So next, inside this another div and the classes are shadow LG, border 2, border gray 900. So we'll use this to show the site details. Now inside this, create an image tag and add a dummy image URL for this. Next, create a h3 tag for the site name. So h3 and add these classes, text excel, font bold, p3. For this h3 also pass a static site name for now. So we'll make this dynamic later. Alright, next create a div and add these classes, grid calls 3, gap 3, my1 p-3. So inside this, create another div for the site URL and add these tailwind CSS classes. Call span to px3 bg blue 200 text blue 800 rounded lg text sm. For this also add a simple dummy URL. So we completed the site details card. Now let's design the add new password form. So inside this same grid div, after this create again another div and add these classes px20 py10 mb10 my5 border 4 border gray 900. This div is for the password form, right? So next inside this div add this create h2 tag and add these classes text 3xl text center. The text will be add new user and password. Next create a p tag and the CSS class is text center. Inside this p tag add this text. You can add new user and password from the below form. Next the form tag. Inside this div with these classes flex call. Now inside this create a label and the classes are text lg font medium mb2. The label text is email. So after this create an input tag and this input type will be email, and after this add these classes border 2 border gray 900 p2 rounded lg w full, and the input name is email. Next we need two more inputs, one for the username and another one for the password. So copy and paste these 2 times and change this label name to username. This type will be text and change the name to username. Next change this third input label to password. This type also password. At last change this name to password. After this all create a submit button. So the classes will be mt10 mx.5 px5 py3 text sm bg gray 900 text white shadow rounded md. That's it. So the button text will be add new password. So that's it for the password form. Alright, now down here let's design the password list table. So after this first grid create these div and add these classes grid calls 1 empty 10. Now inside this div create a table tag and add these classes border 2 border gray 900. Now inside this table create a t-head tags and inside this t-head create tr and add these classes bg gray 200 p52 h14 text left. Now next inside this create a th tag. Classes are border 2 border gray 900 p3. The first th is for the email, so we need 3 more th. So duplicate this. Second th is for the username, so change the name to username. So next one is for the password, and the last t-head for the action column. So now after this t-head create a t-body tags. Inside this we can load the data, but for now I will add some static data to see this table clearly inside the browser. So create a tr tag. The class is h14. Next td and add these classes border 2 border gray 900 and p3. This TD represent the email column, so pass a dummy email address here, something m@m.com. Create another TD, so duplicate this, change this to a username, something. You know what, I'll keep the same email address as the username. So next for the password, duplicate this and add a dummy password. Next for this action column, we'll add edit and delete buttons for this. So duplicate this TD and remove the text. After this, add these buttons. Create a button tag with these classes: mx 0.5, px 5, py 3, text sm, bg gray 900, text white, shadow, rounded md. So this button is for the edit. So the button text is edit. Next, again another button tag. So tailwind classes are mx 0.5, px5, py3, text sm, border 2, border gray 900, text gray 900, shadow, rounded md. So this button is for the delete. So the button text is delete. Perfect. So guys, we successfully completed the design of the password list component. Now let's see this inside the browser. But in order to see this inside the browser, we have to add this password list component list selector inside this app component HTML file, right? But guys, we have another method for this, which is we can load the components inside the browser using the routers. Okay, so let's do that. So go to the app routing module file. Inside this route array, let's define the routes for our Angular application. So first thing first, we have to define the default router. So inside this, create an object. As the first key value pair, pass the path, colon, and this value will be an empty string. So guys, we define the default path like this in Angular. So after this, we have to define the component which should load in this default path. So guys, for this, I will load the login component. Next, again another object. The path is SiteList. So this is for the SiteList component. Next, for the password list, the path is password-list and the component is password list component. Perfect. So routers are ready. But in order to work these routers properly, we have to add the router outlet inside our app component HTML file. So inside this, now we don't need this SiteList app component selector here. So remove it and add the route outlet here. That's it. Now save this all and go to the browser. In our default router, which is this root URL, we can see this login works text, which means guys, in this default path, this loaded the login component. So we define that with this router object. Okay. So now in order to navigate to the site list, we have to go to this router. So inside the browser, go to this URL, our default URL, and slash the router path is site list. Now hit enter. As you can see here, this loaded the site list component. Now let's navigate to the password list. So the path is password-list and hit enter. Now we can see our newly designed password list component. This also looks great, right? Guys, we successfully completed the design of the password list. So in the password list component design, we created this area to show the website data. Now these details are static, but what I want to do is I want to make this dynamic. So how do we do that? As you know guys, we loaded all the site information inside this site list component. So in order to access this data from another component, we have to somehow pass this data to this password list component. For this, we have some different approaches. As example, we can simply pass the site list document ID to this password list component, and we can fetch the relevant document data from the file store using the ID. But as we already have the data, so we don't need to query the database again and again. So in this case, we can simply pass this data to this component via binding to the router. So guys, for this we have two approaches in Angular: router parameter and query parameter. So for this we will use the query parameter approach. Alright, so let's see this in action. For this we don't need to modify anything inside the router path. So we can simply pass the data from this HTML file. I want to open the password list component when clicking this add new password button. So we can do this using the router link directive. So inside this add new password button, add the router link directive. After this assign and pass the router of the password list component here. So inside codes, the router path is password-list. So in order to navigate to this using this router link, we have to add the slash beginning of this router path. That's it for the router link. So let's see if this is working or not. Save this all and go to the browser. As you can see here, when I click this add new password button, this loaded the password list component inside the browser, which means this router link is working as we expected. Alright, now let's see how to pass the site details to the password list component as the query parameters. So this is very simple. For this we have another directive, query params. So this is like a data binding approach in Angular. So inside this, after this router link, query params, this P is capital, and put this inside of square brackets. Okay. So after this assign symbol and inside quotes, we can pass all the data as an object. So open and close an object scope. Inside this, first thing first, we'll pass the document ID. So create a key value pair. The key is ID and the document ID is this ng for loop variable site.id. Next, let's pass the site name. So the key is site name and the value is site.sitename. Next, pass the site URL. So the key is site URL and the value is site.siteURL. Next, image URL. The key is img URL and the value is site.img URL. That's it. So guys, with this we are binding this data to this router. So let's see this. Save this all and go to the browser. Navigate to the password list by using this button. This time, as you can see inside the browser address bar, after this router, we can see these ID, site names and all other query parameters. Awesome, right? So guys, this is how we use the query parameter to pass data between components. Alright guys, now we have the site data inside the URL. Now I want to capture them inside our password list component and replace the static data with this real data set. So okay, so let's begin. So guys, inside the password list component, let's capture the query parameters. To access the query parameter in Angular, we have a module called activated route. So in order to use this with our component, we have to inject that into the constructor of this component. So let's do this. Inside this constructor parenthesis, private route. This variable name can be any name. After this, the module name is activated route. So select this autocomplete. This will add the import statement here. Now we can capture the query parameters using this. So inside this, the same constructor method, this dot route, which is this activated route. So after this dot query params. So guys, this will return all the query parameter values as a observable. So in order to access the observable data, we have to subscribe. So after this dot subscribe, inside this arrow function, we get the data with the parameter. So create a parameter variable something val and set this type to any. Next, inside this, for now let's log this. So console.log and this parameter variable is val. That's it. Now save this all and go to the browser. Inside the browser console, we can see this query parameter object with these values. Cool, right? So guys, we have the data. Now we can load this data inside the view. So for this, we have to assign this to global variable. So first let's define some global variables for this. The first one is for the site ID. So the variable name is site ID and set this type to string. In order to prevent this declaration error, just simply add an exclamation mark before this colon. Okay, let's move on. So the second variable is the site name. So the variable name is site name and this type also string. Next, for the site URL, so the variable name is site URL and this type is string. Next, for the image, so the variable name is imgurl and this type also string. Now assign these subscribe values to these global variables. This dot site id assign val.id. So this is the global variable and this is the query parameter variable. Next, this dot site name assign val dot the query parameter key name is site name. Next, the site URL. So this dot site URL and assign val dot site URL. So this is the global variable that we created earlier and this is the query parameter key name. So don't get confused. Okay. Next, the site image. So the global variable is this dot site ing URL and assign to val dot site ing URL. That's it. So we successfully assigned the query parameter values to the global variable. Now we can use these global variables inside our view. So for this we can use the string interpolation. So inside the password list component HTML file, first remove the site image URL and add the global variable site ing variable inside this src. First make this as a data binding, so wrap this src inside of square brackets. After this, remove this hand-coded URL and add this global variable name site ing URL. Perfect. So next, remove the site name and add a string interpolation. The variable name is site name. After this, remove this URL and create a string interpolation. The variable name is site URL. So we successfully made these static site details into a dynamic real site details. Now save this all and go to the browser. We can see the site data like the previous, but this time we loaded them from the query parameter values. If I go back and open the second site, as you can see here, this time the site details card loaded this DigitalOcean website details. So now this site details loading the data according to the query parameter values that we are passing from the SiteList component. Looks perfect, right? Alright, now let's work on the save query. So first let's make this static form to a template driven form. Nothing much. Inside the password list HTML file, inside this form tag, create a template variable and assign it to a ng form module. So after this, add ng module to all these inputs. For the first one, email input, so add the ng module. Second one, username, so add the ng module here. And after this, the last input password, add the ng module here as well. Now let's write the submit logic. For this, let's use the ng submit event. So inside this form, ng submit, write this inside of brackets. After this, assign it to a method called something on submit. We don't have this method yet, so create this inside the password list component TS file. So after this, all create this method. The method name is on submit, parentheses, and the method scope. In order to get the value of the form to this method, we have to pass this form's value to this method as a parameter. So pass it from here, this template variable f dot value. Now capture this from here create a parameter variable values and set this type to an object. Next, let's log this and see whether this is working or not. So save this all and go to the browser, fill this form and submit here. As you can see here inside this browser console, we got this log with the forms data, which means this is working as we expected. Alright, now let's write the queries for the password. This is a bit different than the previous site queries, because for this we will nest the password file collection inside of site documents. Wait, I'll show you an example. Think now I want to save new account details for the site GoDaddy. So inside the FileStore database, this is the document of the site GoDaddy. Now I want to save a new password under this document. So how do we do that? Guys, for this we have few approaches. The first approach is we can create an array inside this document. So like this. So inside this we can create a field and we can make this field as an array. Inside this we can add an array data. So this array is an object array, so we can set an object array data type with the map data type in FileStore. So select map from here and add the data. First key value pair is email and add the dummy values. As the second value, add the username, and as the third value, add a password. So click add this. So don't forget to give a field name for this password. After this all done, click add this. So this will save this data inside this document. As you can see here, inside this password array, we created our first password list. So like this, we can save another password inside this array. So guys, this is the first approach. But inside of a document, stacking the data like this is not a good practice. And also we will face so many difficulties when dealing with this with the Angular Fire and the queries. It's not easy. Let's look at the second method. For this we will create a separate collection for the password and we'll add the document ID inside the password document to create the relationship between these passwords and the SiteList document. So let's look at an example for this. So create a separate collection here. The collection name is password. Inside this, create a document for the password. So set the ID to auto. The first field is email and set dummy value. And the second value is username. After this, the key value pair is password and set a dummy password. Save this. Alright, now we have the password collection and this document. But this password document has no connection with the site document. Without this, how do we know which password is for which site? So in order to create a connection between these password and the site documents, we can add a field in the password document holds the unique ID of the site document. If this password is for this first document, so copy this document ID and we can create a field inside this document. The field name is site ID and add the site document ID here. Now using this, we can identify the relationship between this password and this site document, right? So guys, this approach is good, but this is also a bit difficult when writing queries. So guys, for this we have a better and easy approach in the FileStore database. So for this we can use a sub-collection in FileStore. So what is this sub-collection? A sub-collection is a collection that can create inside of a document. If we take our example, with the sub-collection approach, we can create this password collection inside this site document, right? So let's see this in action. So if I open this site document, in here we can see this start collection button. So using this, we can create a sub collection inside this document. This is also the same as the root collection. So click on this and create the collection. So the collection name is password. Now inside this collection, we can create password documents to store the passwords as many as we wanted, right? So let's create a password. The set dummy email, username and password. And save this. As you can see here, now inside this site godaddy.com document, we have this password collection, and inside that we have the password document. So guys, now we don't need to create the relationship by adding the site document ID here. It's already connected. How is that? Yes, of course, now this password collection is directly inside this site document. If you want to save another password for this site document, you can simply create another password document here inside this sub-collection passwords. So guys, compared to the previous methods, using the sub-collections in Firestore makes the relationship between the password and site documents much easier. And it's very easy to write Angular Fire queries to retrieve the site information with the password list. So guys, once again, by using sub-collections, we can write more efficient queries to retrieve the information and also simplify the relationship between the password and site documents. This approach is highly recommended when working with Firestore. Alright, so I hope you guys now have a clear picture of how to build a relationship in the Firestore database. Now let's write the query for saving passwords inside the Firestore sub-collection. So we already captured the data inside this onSubmit method. Now let's write the query to save this data. So for this also we'll use the same service file. So after this, I'll add a comment to separate the password queries. Now let's write the save query. So after this, create a method. The method name is add password, parentheses, and the method scope. So like the previous queries, for this also we have to create the collection instance first. So let's do this. Create a variable db instance, assign, and the method name is collection and parentheses. As the first parameter, pass the Firestore module. So this dot Firestore. Now as the second parameter, we have to pass the collection name. So now we are dealing with the password collection, so pass that here as a string. So the collection name is passwords. Next, now we can write the query. For this also we will use the same method add doc like this sites queries. So after this, add doc, parentheses, this required the db instance and the data object. So we will get this data object to this as a parameter. So create a parameter variable to capture this data. So the variable name is data and set this type to object. Now pass the first parameter, this db instant. After this, pass this data parameter variable here. So once it's done, at last, don't forget to return this query. So guys, that's it for the query. Now let's call this from the password component on submit method. So first thing first, inject the password service to this constructor. Then only we can work with this service file. So inside this constructor parentheses, so private password manager service, and the service file is password manager service. Select this autocomplete and this will import this to this component ts file. Next, inside this onSubmit method, so this dot password management service dot the method is add password. So this required the data parameter, so pass it here. This value is parameter variable. Now after this, handle the callbacks. So this also promise. So after this, dot then, and inside this, log the success message. After this, catch the errors. So for this we will use the catch method. So after this dot catch, and inside this log the error message. That's it. Now let's save this all and go to the browser. Fill this form. Email is something a@a.com. Username a user, and the password 123456. So after filling this, hit this add password button. As you can see here, inside this we got this success message, which means the save query worked without any issues. Now let's go to the Firestore console. In here, so we have this password under this site GoDaddy, but inside this GoDaddy password sub collection, we have only one document which was we created earlier manually. So we cannot find the newly added password here. So inside the second site document also, we don't have the password document that we created now. So where is that? Guys, let's look inside this password root collection, this main collection. As you can see here, inside this we can find this newly created password document. So what's going on here? Can you guys guess? Yes, of course. Guys, the problem is with the collection instance or with this DB instance. As you know, for this collection method, we have to pass the collection name as the second parameter. So we already passed that here. But the problem is we pass this collection as a main root collection, not the sub collection. So this password collection must be a sub collection, right? So in order to fix this, we have to pass this collection path correctly. If you look at the sub collection path inside this Firestore database, as you can see here, this is something like this. So this sub collection is inside this document ID, right? So we have to exactly pass this path inside this collection method to create the sub collection. So first the main site collection, so add this here. Next the site document ID, so where we want to create the sub collection. Next we have to pass the site document ID where we want to create the sub collection. So we will get the document ID to this method as a parameter. So create a parameter variable to capture that. The variable name is site ID and this type will be string. Next pass that here. For this we'll use template variables. So remove these quotes and add backticks. After this sites, after this collection name sites, add slash, the document ID. So dollar symbol inside curly brackets, the variable name is site ID. And after this slash, and now pass the sub collection name passwords. That's it. So guys, this is how we define the sub collection path. If we pass this collection name directly to this will consider this collection as a root collection. So hope you guys got the idea. Now save this and again go to the browser. Now again save a new password. Fill this form. As you can see here inside this browser console, we got this success message. Go to the Firestore and look inside this document. As you can see here, this time we got this password document inside this sub collection. Awesome, right? So guys, this is how we save data inside of a sub collection in Firestore using the Angular Fire module. Alright, now let's work on the load password query. So let's write the query for this. Go to the service file, inside this, create a method. The method name is load passwords and parentheses. For this query also we need the site ID to capture the password sub collection. So create a parameter variable for this site ID and this type is string. After this create the method scope. Now inside this let's write the query. So for this also we need the DB instance. So this is same as this previous, so copy and paste it here. The path is this because we are dealing with the sub collection. Remember that, right? Alright, so next the query. So guys, for this we will use the collection data angular file method. So we already used this. So after this, collection data and parentheses. So inside this, pass the DB instance as the parameter, and after this we have to load the password document ID. So pass this as the second parameter. So inside curly brackets, ID field, colon, inside quotes, ID. At last, return this query. Perfect. So next let's call this from the password list component TS file. So guys, first thing first, let's create a method for this. The method name is load password, after this parentheses, and the method scope. So guys, inside this, let's call the load password service method. So this dot password service, which is this injected service. So after this dot, and the service method name is load password. This required the site ID. So we already stored the ID inside the site ID global variable from the router query parameter. So pass that to this method. This dot site ID. This will return the file store data as an observable. So store it inside of a global variable. Create a global variable, something named password list. This type is observable, and the observable type is an array, and at last the array type is any. So next, inside this load password method, assign this global variable password list to this query. So this dot password list assign to this method call. Perfect. Now we have the data. Now let's load this inside the password list table. So go to the password list component HTML file, and inside this table add the ng4. So ng4 assign, the loop is let password of password list, which is this global variable. So guys, in order to loop observable, we have to add the async pipe. So after this, add the async pipe here, pipe symbol, and the pipe is async. Alright, so now inside this, remove the static data and add the string interpolation. First data is for the email, so add a string interpolation. After this password, so which is this loop variable. After this dot, and the key name is email. Next, again string interpolation. Inside this password dot username. So after this password column, so remove this and add the string interpolation. Password, which is this loop variable. After this the key name, so dot key name also password. That's it. Now save this all and go to the browser. As you can see here, this time this data is loaded with the real data. Let's save another password here. Fill this form. As you can see here, the newly added password is loaded inside this table, which means this load data file store query is working without any issues. Alright, so guys, let's move on to the edit password query. So this is also the same as the site list. We load the editing data inside this same form, converting this to an edit password form. So let's do this. First, let's call a method from this edit button. So bind a click event to this button, inside brackets, click event, and from here call to a method something edit password. After this, add the parentheses. Now pass the data to this method that we want to edit. So first the email. So password.email. So this password is this loop variable, right? So after this second parameter, password.username, and the third parameter, password.password. At last we need the document ID, so pass that as well. So password.id. Awesome. So now inside this password list component is file, create this method. So after this down here, create the method name is edit password. After this parenthesis, so we are receiving the data as the parameter for this method. So create a parameter variable to capture them. So the first variable is email and type is string. Next the username, type is string. So after this password and this type also string. At last we need the password ID. So the variable is password ID and this type also string. Perfect. Now guys, inside this assign these parameter values to global variables. So let's define the global variables for this. So guys, we did this earlier. In that section I explained everything one by one. I think I don't need to explain it again. If any of you guys don't know about this, if any of you guys don't get this what I'm doing here, so please go back to the site list editing section and learn it again, right? Alright, so back to the work. So in this global scope, create global variables. So the first variable is for the email. So the variable name is email and the type is string. Next the username, the type is string. So after this password, the type is string, and at last password ID and this type also string. Now inside this edit password method, assign these parameter values to global variables. So this dot email, which is this global variable, assign email. So once again, this is the global variable and this is the parameter variable. Hope you guys got the idea. So next for the username, so this dot username, assign username. After this the password, so this dot password, assign password. At last this dot password ID, assign password ID. So now we successfully assign the data to the global variables. Now let's load these global variables data inside the form. As you know, for this we can use the two-way data binding approach. So go to the HTML file, wrap this ng model inside of brackets and square brackets. Now assign this to the email global variable. So this input field is for the email, right? So next to this username input, so wrap this ng model and assign it to the username global variable. At last wrap this ng model, this password input, and assign it to the password global variable. Alright, so next I want to make this add new password text and the submit button text according to the form's type. So let's do this as well. So first create a global variable for this, form state, and type is string. Set this default state to add new. Now inside this edit password method, change this form state global variable value to edit. Now go to the HTML file and remove this text and add this global variable form state here using the string interpolation. So after this, inside this paragraph, also remove this add new and add the string interpolation, and the variable is form state. So after this, add the string interpolation inside the submit button as well. That's it guys. Now let's see this inside the browser. Save this all and go to the browser. Now click on this edit button. As you can see here, this loaded the password details inside this form, and this form state also changed to edit. Cool, right? So guys, the preparation for the editing is done. Now let's work on the file store query. Alright guys, now let's write the edit query. So inside the service file, create a method called update password and the parentheses. So for this we need 3 parameters. So first one is site ID, the second one is password ID, and the last one we need the data to update. So guys, now inside this let's first define the document instant, the same as this update site. So here const doc instance assign, and for this we will use the doc angular fire method. So doc and parentheses. Inside this now we have to pass 3 parameters. The first one is the firestore module. So this dot firestore. As the second parameter, pass this collection path for our password sub collection. So I will copy this from the previous code and paste it here. So now as the last parameter, we have to pass the password document ID. So pass this password ID parameter variable here. So next, to update the data inside the file store, we will use the update doc angular file method. So after this, update doc and parentheses. Inside this, first pass the document instance. As the second parameter, pass the data. So at the end, return this query. Alright guys, that's it for the update query. Now we have the query, so now we can call this from the component ts file. So as you guys know, we have only one form and only one submit method for both add new and for the editing process. So first we have to differentiate the form state and perform the queries according to that. The same thing like the site submit method. So we did this already. So guys, we can capture the current form state with the form state global variable. So let's do this. Inside this one submit method, create an if statement, and the condition is this dot form state equals add new. If this is add new, we will perform the add new query. So remove this add new query from here and put this inside this if block. After this, else if condition, and the condition is form state equals edit. So guys, if this is edit, call the update password service method. So now inside this if else block, this dot password service, and call the method update password. So this requires 3 parameters, so pass them. First parameter site document ID. So we already store that inside the site ID global variable. So pass that here. As the second parameter, we have to pass the password document ID. So this is stored inside the password ID global variable. So pass that here as the second parameter. At last we have to send the data. So we will get the data to this with this parameter variable. So pass that here values. Perfect. Now handle the callback. So after this dot them, inside this log the success message. And after this dot catch, and inside this log the error message. Alright guys, that's it for the update query and all the process. Now save this all and go to the browser. Edit this password. As you can see here, inside the browser console, we got the edit success message. And inside this table, we can see this newly edited data, which means everything working as we expected. Guys, before moving on to the next, we'll reset this form to the add new password state after completing the editing process. So for this, create a separate method, something reset form. Inside this, first reset all these two-way data binding form variables. So this dot email assign, so assign it to an empty string. Next, the username. After this, password variable. After this all, set the form state global variable to add new. At last, reset the password ID variable as well. So now call this method inside this update success state, inside this, then call back this dot form reset and the parentheses. And also guys, reset the form inside the save method as well. That's it. Save this all and go to the browser, edit this password, and as you can see here, this time this form state change to its default state, add new, and all this input text is also set to empty. Alright, let's work on the delete query. So first let's write the delete query. So inside the service file, create a method for this, delete password and parentheses. This requires two parameters, site ID and the password ID. For this also we will use the doc instance. So copy this from the update password method and paste it here. Next, the delete doc angular file method and the parentheses. Now inside this we have to pass the doc instance and at last return this statement. That's it. So now let's call this method when clicking on the delete button. So inside the HTML file, add a click event for this delete button. So inside this delete button, click event and call a method from here. The method name is delete password. So this required the password ID. So pass it as a parameter for this method. Now inside the SiteList Component TS file, create this delete password method. This required parameter, so declare it password and the type is string. Now inside this method, call the delete service method. So this dot password service dot delete password and parentheses. This required two parameters, one the site ID. So we captured and stored the site ID inside of site ID global variable. So pass that here. Next, we need the password ID. So we will get that with this parameter. So pass that as the second parameter for this method. Finally, handle the callbacks. Dot then, and inside this log the success message. After this, dot catch, and inside this log the error message. Perfect. So now save this all and go to the browser. Delete this. As you can see here, the password deleted from this list. And inside the console, we can see this delete success message. Awesome, right? So guys, for this password components all query success state, I used the browser console. This is not a good practice, right? So user will not see this log. So like the site component will show an alert message for this. So nothing much, we already did this. So let's copy and paste them here. So first copy the is success and success message variable from the SiteList Component ES file and paste it inside the password list component. Next, copy the show alert method and paste it here. And at last, copy the HTML markups from the SiteList Component HTML file and paste it inside the password list HTML file. Now we have all the markups and methods for this success alert message. Now we have to call this show alert message from these queries success states. So inside this, then callback, let's call the show alert message. This required the message parameter, so pass the message. So this is for the save. So the message is data save successfully. So next for this update, so call this method this dot alert message and parentheses. So this required the message, so pass it from here. This is for the update query, so the alert message will be data updated successfully. So next for this delete, so call the method and the alert message will be data deleted successfully. Alright, so now save this all and go to the browser. Save a new password. As you can see here, this time we got this success alert. So again, update this. So we got this update alert message. And at last, delete this. As you can see here, this time we got this delete success message. Perfect. So guys, we completed all the queries of the password list as well. Before we moving on to the next, we have another work to do here. As you guys know, with this we are storing the password of our user accounts inside the 5-star database. 5-star database is a secure database. We don't need to worry about that. But in order to add an extra layer of protection to our password, we can encrypt the data from our front end and save the encrypted data inside the database. So in this case, even though if someone accesses our 5-star database console, they cannot steal our password because it's already encrypted. So let's do this. So guys, for this we can use a third-party npm package called crypto.js. So now let's install this using the npm or the node package manager. So inside the VS Code integrated terminal, run this command npm I, this I stands for install, right? So after this, the package name is crypto-js. Hit enter to execute this command. So once the installation is completed, we need another package to use this crypto.js with the TypeScript. So let's install it. So now again inside the integrated terminal, run this command npm I at types / crypto-js. Alright, now we have the required packages to do this encryption. So let's see this in action. Inside the SiteList component is file, first import these methods from crypto.js. So in here, add these, import, inside curly brackets, the first module is AES, use all capital letters, and also we need another method, ENC. This all simple letters. So after this, from, and the path is crypto.js. Awesome. Next, let's create a method to do this encryption. So create a method, something encrypt password and parentheses. For this method, we will pass the password to encrypt. So create a parameter variable and don't forget to create the method scope. Now inside this, we can encrypt the password using the crypto.js AES method. So we imported this already. Guys, one more thing, in order to encrypt using the crypto.js, we need a unique secret key. So first let's generate a unique secret key from an online tool. So go to the Google and search encryption key generator. Go to this first result. From here select this 256-bit key size. This will give us a unique key. So copy this and go to the VS Code and create a variable for this inside this method, something const secret key, and assign it to the key that we generated from the online tool. So guys, now we have the secret key. Guys, for this you don't need to use this key same as mine. You guys can use anything for this, right? Alright, so next we can write the encryption code AES dot encrypt and parentheses. This requires two parameters. First one is the password that we want to encrypt. So we will get the password to this method as the parameter. So pass the parameter variable here, password. Next we have to pass the secret key. So pass the secret key here. So after this we have to convert this to a string value. So after this dot to string and parentheses. So now this will return the encrypted password. So we'll store this inside of a variable. So assign this to a variable something const encrypted password. So after this, let's log this encrypted password for now. Alright, so now let's call this method from the onSubmit method. So inside this, before this if condition, let's call this encrypted password method. So this dot encrypted password and the parentheses. This required the password parameter, so pass it. So inside this values dot password. So we are getting to this method the form data as an object and the password object key name is password. So that's what I pass here. Hope you guys got the idea. For now I will comment all these if else logics and queries. So save this all and go to the browser. Now fill this form. Password is 123456 and hit this save button. As you can see here inside this browser console we got this encrypted password. Cool, right? So now we have the encrypted password. Next let's push this encrypted password to the file store database instead of the raw password. So how do we do that? Very simple. All we have to do is just replace this forms value object's password value with this new encrypted password. First, in order to capture this encrypted password from this onSubmit method, just return this encrypted password variable from here. So now this method call will return the encrypted password. So store it inside of a variable const encrypted password and assign this to this method call. So now we can replace this encrypted password inside our form values object. So how do we do that? Very simple. Form value object. So this parameter variable is values dot inside this password value key is password. So dot password. Assign the new encrypted password here, which is stored inside this variable. So assign this variable encrypted password. That's it. So now let's log this form values object and we can see whether this password value is replaced with the encrypted password or not. I'll add another log top here before this encrypted password. So this will log the old values object with the raw password and this one will log the values object with the encrypted password. Right, so save this all and go to the browser. Fill this form and hit the save button. Here we can see these two objects. The first one is with the normal raw password and the second object has replaced the raw password with the encrypted password. Awesome, right? So now we have the encrypted password here. So uncomment all these and save this. Again go to the browser and save a new password, fill this form and hit this save button. As you can see here we got this success alert and also inside this table we can see this new password, but this time we got this encrypted password. Perfect, right? Now we have the encrypted password. Now let's see how to decrypt this password. Think now I want to log into this GoDaddy account, but in here I can see this encrypted password. So in order to log into this, I need the correct password, not this encrypted password, right? So in order to see this password, we have to decrypt this password. So let's do this. For this also we can use the same crypto.js module. So first let's create a method for this. The method name is decrypt password and parentheses. After this, add the method scope. For this method, we will receive the encrypted password as a parameter value. So create a parameter variable to capture this password. The variable name is something password and set this type to string. Next, inside this first thing first, we need the password encryption key. So for this, use the same key that we use to encrypt the password. If we use something different key, this decryption will not work. So copy this key from the encryption method, and now inside this method create a variable for this const secret key and paste the key that we copied here. Next we can decrypt the password using the same AES method from crypto.js. So we already imported that. Okay. So after this AES dot decrypt. So this time we are dealing with the decryption. So for this we'll use the decrypt method from crypto.js. Right. So after this method parentheses. So this required two parameters, encrypted password and the secret key. So we will get the password to this method with this parameter. So pass that here as the first parameter, password. And for the second parameter, pass the secret key. So guys, after this we have to convert this value to a string value. So dot to string and parentheses. Inside this pass the encode method. So enc dot utf8. So this U is capital. Awesome. So guys, this will return the decrypt password. So let's store this inside of a variable. Create a variable const dec password. After this, assign this to this decryption method. Right. So now at the end, return this decrypt password variable from this method. So guys, that's it for the decrypt method. Now what I want to do is I want to add a decrypt button in front of this password, and I will decrypt this password when clicking on this decrypt button. So let's do this. Inside the password list HTML file, inside this password td, after this string interpolation, create a button and add these tailwind CSS classes mx.5, px5, py1, text sm, bg red 500, text white, shadow, rounded md. The button text is decrypt. So now let's call a method when we click this button. So the click event binding, and the method name is, we can directly call the decrypt method from here, but I will keep this method separate and will create a new method for this. So the method name is something on decrypt. After this, add the parentheses. For this method, pass the encrypted password. So this loop variable password and dot password. Next, let's create this method inside the TS file. The method name is on decrypt and parentheses. So create a parameter variable to capture the password. So the parameter variable is password and set this type to string. After this, don't forget to add the method scope. So from this method, call the decrypt password method. So this dot decrypt password. So this method required the password as the parameter. So pass it from here. Now this return the decrypted password. So capture it. So create a variable for this const decrypt password and assign it to this method call. For now, let's log this and see whether this password decryption is working or not. So now save this all and go to the browser. Click one of these decrypt button As you can see here, inside the browser console, we got this decrypted password. So guys, this decryption is working as we expected. So guys, now I want to replace this encrypted password with the current decrypted password. So how do we do that? Very simple. We stored all the password inside this password list array global variable, right? So inside this array, we have a list of objects that carry the password account details. So we can simply replace that object password value like this previously encrypted password. So let's do this. So in order to do this, we need the array index number. So let's get that. So inside the HTML file, we can get this array index with this ng4. So after this, semicolon, define a variable, let I assign this to the array index. So now we have the array index. So let's pass this to the onDecrypt method as a parameter. So inside this, pass this array index as the second parameter. So the index variable is this I. So pass that here. Now inside the TS file, let's capture this. Create a parameter variable for this. Variable name is index and set this type to number. So now inside this, after this, let's assign this decrypted password to the array password object. Guys, we have a problem here. So as you know, this password list is observable. So replacing an observable value is a bit confusing and it's not easy. So what I'm going to do is I will subscribe to this load password service method call from here and assign the observable data array to this password list by making this an array. So very simple, let's do this. So first make this password list data type to an array. So remove this observable data type and make this data type as an array, and this array type is any. Now inside this load password method, remove this assign, subscribe to this method. So after this method, call dot subscribe and the parameter variable val and arrow function. So inside this, we are getting the data with this val parameter variable. So assign this to the password list array global variable. Now we have the data. So now go to the HTML file and remove this async pipe. This time we are looping through an array, not an observable. So remove this async pipe. That's it. Save this and go to the browser. As you can see here, this loaded the password documents inside this table without any problem. So which means this is working as previous. Awesome. So now guys, we can easily replace this decrypt password value. So let's do this inside the decrypt method. First the password list array. So this dot password list and filter this to the target array using the index number. So we get the index number to this as this parameter. So filter this array using this index number. After this square brackets and pass the index number here. After this the key name, password, and assign this to the decrypt password variable, the password. So with this we are capturing the target array with the index and replacing the password keys value with new decrypted password. Very easy, right? So guys, that's it for the decryption. So save this all and go to the browser. Now hit this decrypt button. As you can see here, this password is decrypted. And now I can see my password, right? Perfect. So guys, this is how we deal with the encryption and decryption using the Crypto.js npm plugin. Alright, we successfully completed the password list components, all related logics and queries. So we have almost completed our password manager app's functionalities. Now let's work on the login component and the login query. So as usual, first we'll work on the design, then we can move on to the query part. So guys, we already generated the login component. So open the login component HTML file. Inside this, add these markups. So create a section tag and add this utility class. bggray50. So now inside this, create a div and add these classes flex call, items center, justify center, px6, py8, mx auto, and h screen. Now inside this flex div, create another div for the login card and add these classes w full, border 4, border gray 900, bg white, rounded lg, shadow, mxwmd. Now inside this, create another div and the tailwind CSS classes p6 space dash y dash 6. So next, create a h tag and add these text to Excel, font bold, text gray 900. The h1 text is login to your account. So after this, create a form tag and add this tailwind class space y6. Now inside this form tag, create a div. So inside this div, create a label tag for the input. Add these classes to this label block mb2, text sm, font medium, text gray 900. The label text will be your email. So now inside the same div, create a input tag. This type is email. So the input name is email. After this, add the placeholder. So the placeholder text is name@company.com. So now add these tailwind classes to this input block w full, p 2.5, text sm, bg gray 50, border 4, border gray 900, text gray 900, and rounded lg. So we need another input for this password. So this also same as this input. So duplicate this, change the input type to password and the name to password, and also change the placeholder, and don't forget to change this label name as well. So after this, let's create a submit button. Create a button tag and add these classes w full, text white, bg gray 800, hover colon, bg gray 900, font medium, rounded lg, text sm, px5, py 2.5, text center. So the button text is sign in. Perfect. Guys, that's it for the login form markups. So save this and go to the browser. Navigate to the default URL. As you guys know, we defined the default router to load this login component, right? So in here, we can see our newly designed login component with this login card. And this looks awesome. But in this login component, I don't want to show this navbar. So let's remove this from the app component HTML file and put this inside of the SiteList component and the password list component. Right, so save this all and go to the browser. Now this looks perfect. Alright, now let's work on the login query. So first let's write the query. For this also we'll use the same service file. So inside the password manager service file, at the bottom let's write the login query. So guys, in order to work with this login query, we need the auth module. If you can remember, when we installing Angular Fire package, I selected the Firestore and Firebase auth module to install. So that's why I got this. So without this, this will not work. Any of you guys missed to install this, install the Angular 5 again and select the auth module. Alright, so go to the service file. For this guys, we need the auth module. So like this Firestore module, first let's write the import statement for this. Import inside curly brackets, the module name is auth. This is coming from @angular/fire/auth. So in order to work with this auth module, we have to inject this to the constructor like this Firestore module. So inside this constructor parentheses, private auth and this module auth. So now in order to perform the login, we need another method. So this also comes from the same authentication module path. So inside this same import, the method name is sign in with email and password. That's it. So now we can implement the login query using this method. So guys, down here, let's create a method for this. The method name is something login parentheses and the method scope. In order to perform the login operation, we need the email and password. So we will get that to this method via parameter. So create parameter variables for this. So email and type is string. The second parameter variable is password and this type also string. Now inside this let's write the login query. The method that we imported, sign in with email and password and the parentheses. So this required the auth module, email and password. So pass them here. The first parameter is auth module, which is this injected module variable. So this dot auth. Next the email. So pass this parameter variable email. And last, pass the password parameter variable. That's it. So guys, that's it for the query. So in order to access this from the component.ts file, return this. Okay, now we have the query. Let's call this from the login component.ts file. So first thing first, let's make this login form a template driven form. So first create a template variable and assign it to the ng form module. After this, add ng module to these inputs. ng module. Perfect. So now let's write the submit event. As you know, for this we will use the ng submit. So add that here inside this form tag. From here, call a method. The method name is as usual on submit. So pass these form values to this method as a parameter. So now go to the login component.ts file and create this onSubmit method. Capture the parameter with the parameter variables. So the variable name is values and this type is object. Now from here we have to call the login service query. So guys, as you know, in order to work with the service file, first we have to inject that service file to the constructor. You guys are already know about this, right? So let's do this. First, let's create a constructor. Inside this parentheses, private password manager service, and the service name is password manager, and select this complete. So this will automatically import this part to this component. Alright, now inside this onSubmit method, call the login method. So this dot password service and the method name is login. So this required the email and password parameters. So this values object carrying these values from the login form. So pass them here. The first parameter is email. So this object values dot email. Next password. So values dot password. So now after this, let's handle the callbacks. Nothing much, same as the previous queries. So this also return a promise. So after this, dot then and the arrow function. Inside this, log the success message. Login success. Next, the error state. So dot catch and the parameter error, and inside this log this error message. That's it. So guys, we successfully completed the login query and it's all logics. But in order to work with this, first we have to activate the authentication inside the Firebase console. So let's do this. So go to the Firebase console, go to this authentication tab, and from here activate the authentication. So guys, the Firebase has several authentication methods. For this course, we will use only the email and password method. In case if you guys want to learn about these authentications, please leave a comment below. Alright, so from here select this email and password option and enable this from here. So after this, save these changes. Once you have done this, go to the users tab and create a new user. So click on this add user, fill this email address and password, email something m@m.com, and the password 123456. So after this add the user. So now we can log into our application using this email and password. So now go to our password manager application and try to log into this using our newly created Firebase user. So the email is m@m.com and the password is 123456. Now click on this login button. Look at this guys. As you can see here inside this console log, we got this success message, which means this login query working without any issues. Alright guys, now what I want to do is I want to navigate to the SiteList component if this login is successful. If this is failed, I want to show an error alert message here. So let's do this. So in order to open the SiteList component, we have to navigate to the SiteList router. We defined this inside the router modules, right? So for this, we have to navigate to this programmatically. Guys, how do we do that? Yes, of course, for this we can use the router module in Angular. So let's see this in action. So inside this login component TS file, import the router module. So import inside curly brackets, the module name is router with capital R. This is coming from @angular/router. Alright, next let's navigate to the SiteList router when the login is success. So the login success state is inside this then callback. So in here, let's remove the log and add this. Wait, in order to use the router module, first we have to inject that to the constructor. Otherwise this will not work, right? So let's do that. Inside the constructor parentheses, private router, and the module is router. Alright, now back to the work. Now we can navigate to the SiteList router using this injected router. So inside this, then method this dot router dot navigate. After this parentheses. Inside this parentheses, pass the router path like this. So open and close square brackets. Now inside this codes, pass the router path with the slash symbol. So slash router path is site-list. That's it. So this will navigate to this router when this login is success. So now let's see if this is working or not. So save this and go to the browser. Log into this using the correct email and password m@m.com and the password is 123456. As you can see here, this time this navigate to the SiteList component view. Awesome, right? So guys, this navigation is working as we expected. So next what I want to do is I want to show an alert if the user enters the wrong email or the password. So wait, I'll show you an example. So go to the login form and this time login with something wrong email and password. As you can see here, this time we got this error message inside the browser console. So saying the email or password is wrong. So now what I want to do is I want to show an alert message here with this email or password wrong message rather showing this console log. So the end user can easily identify the error. Okay. So first let's add the HTML markup for this. Inside the login HTML file, we'll show this message before this form tag. So before this form tag, create a div tag and add these Tailwind CSS classes. So P5, my3, bg red 100, text red 900. The error message is the username or password is wrong. Next, we'll show this alert message conditionally. So create an ngIf and the boolean value variable is error. So still we don't have this variable. So let's create this. Go to the login component TS file and create this variable is error. This type is boolean and set the initial value to false. Now inside this onSubmit method service call, we capture the error with this catch method. So inside this, set the isError value to true to show the alert message in the view. So this dot isError assign true. That's it. So now save this and go to the browser and navigate to the login page. This time type a wrong email or password. As you can see here, if the email or password is wrong, we are getting this error message saying that username or password is wrong. Perfect. So guys, we successfully handled the login success and error states. Awesome. Alright guys, let's add the logout logic for this. So this is not much. What I want to do is if the user press the logout button, I will redirect this to the login router, which is the default URL. So let's do this. Go to the Navbar component HTML file and add the router link directive to this logout button. The router is just slash because we are redirecting to the login page, which is linked to the default root router. That's it. So save this and go to the browser. Click on this logout. As you can see here, this is navigate to the root URL. Perfect. Yes guys, I understand that this is not the correct login logout system, but don't worry, I will create a complete guide about authentication and authorization in the second part of this application tutorial video. I will also include additional features to this password manager application. So in that tutorial, if you have any suggestions for new features, please leave a comment and I will include them into the second part of this tutorial. Alright guys, this is it for this course. I hope you all learned something from this. So if you guys think this is a valuable video, please don't forget to give a thumbs up. And also if you are new to Okta Academy, don't forget to subscribe. Alright guys, we'll meet you with another awesome tutorial like this. Until then, learn smart, not hard.